I think sometimes the people who we see as, great artists or great creators, a lot of times they're actually not the best that's out there. It's just that they're the best at putting their work out there and having it be seen. Some of the best creators and artists in the world are people that haven't even been discovered because they're not promoters. They're not people who know how to market themselves, or maybe they don't even have the confidence to put their work out.
Caroline Lee is a podcaster and photographer that wants you to ship your ideas. She says that we learn the most when we're constantly creating and releasing our work. For many of us, the problem comes when we spend too much time with a project. We labor over every detail, each pixel, until it's perfect. The problem? Perfect doesn't exist. In our conversation today, we discuss what it takes to make great art, when feedback is important. We tell awkward stories about nude spas and how to break through the noise in 2018. But before that conversation, let us do some housekeeping. I'm starting to take questions on this podcast. The most common emails that I get are from creatives asking me for advice about their specific struggles. If you have a question, if you're a filmmaker, a creative, an artist, and you want to get my advice and my guest advice, send a video of your question under 2 minutes to hello@mattdiavella.com. I look forward to hearing from you. If you don't know how to spell my last name, D-A-V-V as in Victor, E-L-L-A. Rating. Have you gotten some value out of the Ground Up show? If so, I'd love it if you could give me a quick rating on iTunes. I want to keep this podcast 100% advertisement free, because what's worse than a 10-minute advertisement before a podcast starts? No offense to people and podcasters who do that. I listen to a lot of podcasts who do that. It's just I don't want you to have to skip over it and waste your time listening to a pitch for a product. So I don't do advertising, and I want to keep it that way. But in order to do that, I want to build this show. I want to be able to help get these stories, these amazing stories, in front of even more people. So leave a rating. That really helps. And I mean, at the bare minimum, it makes me feel warm and fuzzy on the inside. And I feel like that alone should incentivize you to leave a rating. All right, let's get to this week's podcast episode. This is the amazing Caroline Lee. You're listening to The Ground Up Show, a podcast that inspires creatives to make meaningful content and pursue their passions. My name's Matt Diavella, and I'm a filmmaker best known for the Netflix documentary Minimalism. And I'm sitting down with creators to talk about their process, the lessons they've learned, and how to make an impact. Check 1, 2. How do you sound?
I sound like this.
Great. You got a good podcasting voice, by the way.
Thank you.
Is that why you got started? Did somebody tell you? You need to be on radio.
No, that's not true. But, it's sometimes I listen to episodes that I record and think, oops, vocal fry, a little too much.
Vocal fry.
A little too much.
Yeah. Vocal fry is one of those things that I don't notice until somebody points it out. I find myself slipping into it sometimes as well. Like that, even sometimes our voices naturally have a little bit of fry to them, right?
Right. But I think it's when, specifically, it can be a little bit too affected in women's voices.
Sure.
And so, yeah, just, I try not to do
because you want to sound
much.
strong. You don't want to be like, I don't know.
Right. I don't know. I'm just thinking too hard. It's just not, it's just, there's, I want to remove all possible judgment. Well, not all possible, but within reason.
Right. Well, that's one of those tough things where you want to improve. And like you were saying before we started the podcast, you listen back to your episodes and then maybe not release them right away. And then you start to doubt whether you're like, no, this wasn't that good. I shouldn't release this thing.
Yeah,
but
that was old me.
Old you.
Before I knew that I said that thing too many times. Oh, I love that. I say that so much. And I'm just like, God, I did it again. I did it again.
My thing is no way. I'm always just blown away by people. No way. I'm
you're a very positive listener.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good thing.
It is.
I wonder sometimes if listeners pick up on those subtleties.
I hope not, but probably.
Yeah, that's why, even looking at feedback, I don't like to, thank God so far I haven't gotten much negative feedback. I don't see much. But it's like, do you look at that? Is it even worth it? Because it's great to see the good feedback. It's great to see when people are happy and excited about what you're working on. But then inevitably you're going to see a couple people in there that just say mean things. And sometimes it like cuts you to the core. You're like, damn it. Like that's exactly what I was thinking about myself.
I'm still waiting for a bad review, which hopefully they're not going to happen now because I just put it out there. But yeah. I'm still waiting for like a negative review publicly. And when I've gotten feedback, it's because I've asked for it. So I've been like prepared and open to if someone's like, hey, you do this thing, or hey, we hate it. What this thing that you do? Stop it.
Stop doing this thing.
Yeah. So far when I've gotten feedback, it's because I am open to it. But right. I think when you get it and you're not expecting it, that's when it can be like, ugh.
Yeah, I haven't gotten it on the iTunes reviews or ratings yet either, where it's like this guy's boring as shit. I hate Matt. Like, don't listen to this podcast. Which I think I'm actually ready for it. When we released Minimalism, I think there's like I don't know if they still do it, but on Netflix they would have comments where you can like see what people are saying about it. And I didn't read it, but my co-producer Josh said, he's like, yeah, man, like, well, because I was making fun of him because I saw somebody said that they weren't real minimalist because they used hair product and got fancy haircuts. And I was dying laughing because that kind of feedback, it's like, it obviously doesn't sting. It's just that person is insane. It doesn't quite get the concept.
Right.
But then he's like, yeah, and I saw one about you where somebody said this would be a good documentary if they hired a good director for it. Oh. And I was like, I just thought it was funny, but at the same time, you're like, damn, like that's a burn right there.
Stings.
But I think you just got to take it. And the bigger you get and the more people that you reach, inevitably you're going to rub some people the wrong way.
Yeah. And I think that's part of having a good, I don't want to say brand, but it says that you stand for something if you have haters. Because if everyone likes you, then I think that's what we call vanilla. And most people like vanilla and most people like cheese pizza. Even if they don't love it, no one has hate feelings for vanilla or cheese pizza. People might have hate feelings for like Blue Moon with cereal chunks in it because they're like, ew. But then at least the people who love it really love it and they're fans for life, like die hard Blue Moon with cereal chunks in it fans.
I have never heard of that combination.
I just made it up.
Might have to try it.
I was going to say pralines and dick, and then I was like, that's just
that's good.
That's a, Wayne's World reference.
Yeah.
And I didn't know if I was allowed to say pralines and dick.
You can now. Yeah. It's funny because half of the episodes I'm like, what did we curse on that episode? I totally forget. Like I curse quite a bit, but I sometimes put a filter on, especially when I'm hanging out with my nephew or younger kids. I'm like, you kind of put that filter on yourself and it carries through to the rest of your life. But then on the podcast, it's just 50-50. Sometimes it depends on my guest. If they will, then I'll just be like, all right, then I come back into cursing. But then I don't know whether to put that explicit thing on iTunes.
I just put it on for all of them.
I saw that you just did it for all of them. And I was like, I should probably just do that, even if it's not, just because actually just to let people know the kind of character you're going to be.
Well, and we talk about all sorts of weird things, and it's not, the whole topic isn't always about that one weird thing, but sometimes it'll come up for like 3 minutes and I don't want to have to take it out because, it's a young audience. Sure. Plus, I feel like more and more people are just, like all my friends that have kids will just tell their kids, like, sometimes people say these words and we don't say these words until we're this old, or like we don't.
Right. It's like very strange.
You have to kind of at some point tell kids, hey, some naughty old women that are in their 30s say words like dick.
Yeah. Do you remember the first time that you cursed?
Yeah.
When was it?
I remember, oh man, memories coming up. There was a girl that told me that I wasn't cool because I probably wasn't allowed to say that sucks. And I remember being like, I'm allowed to say that. And she was like, probably not. And it was like at our family's vacation home in Michigan. And so I only saw her in the summers, but she had this idea of me that was like, I was not allowed to do anything. And so she's like, you're not allowed to say that sucks. And I was like, yeah, I am. Watch me. And so I just was like, oh, that sucks. Oh, that
Wow.
sucks. And then I went home and I was like, oh, Mom, that sucks. And she's like, you were not allowed to say that.
Oh my God. That sucks. Like, that's not really a terrible curse word, but at the time, sucks. And I think maybe we've changed and we've all grown up as a culture as to where we've decided to say sucks is not a bad word and you could say sucks. I remember my buddy Jesse Earl, still friends to this day. He was actually on this podcast. And he was cursing way before me. Like, he got in the game a year before me.
You counted the days?
Yeah. Because like I was like a mama's boy, at least at this time, and I was trying to I didn't think cursing was a proper thing for a young boy to do. And then he's like, dude, you don't curse. Are you gonna curse? And I was like, I curse, yeah. Shit. And I just said shit, and it just felt so. It felt wrong and right at the same time. And then since then, my life changed. Yeah, it just opened up an entire new way of living for me. It's just so funny. Good. I feel like everybody can probably remember, hopefully, the first time they cursed. If you like lived a somewhat innocent life. If you didn't live an innocent life, then like cursing was just part of your life from before you can remember.
And maybe you're cooler than the rest of us.
Maybe you're cooler. That's probably it. But your podcast is called Out of Line.
It is.
Is that because you touch on different topics, or is it because it's kind of like you were talking about the whole idea of interviewing online personalities and talking about things they don't typically discuss? Yeah.
So the premise is all about people who have some sort of either following or just are known for something. So some of the people that I've had on are, authors or musicians who their following online came after they had already created a name for themselves. So that's also been interesting to kind of see the difference between people who sort of found fame, air quotes, on the internet as like influencers or bloggers, and people who had another reason why they were known, and then the following just came naturally because of the other thing that they created. Those are like two very different camps, which is interesting in itself. Right. But then the whole podcast explores just something in their realities that they like their day-to-day normal life that they don't really talk about online, so something that isn't a part of their brand. And so I wanted to plan like online, offline, and so there was a lot of like walk the line, getting thrown around. Like I liked that line was like in both, and so just lots of playing with names, and that's where Out of Line kind of I forgot, there was one I actually had thought I was going to use before Out of Line, and then I told a few people that know me really well, and they were like, that's too boring for you. Like, you need to do something. You're a little bit more like out of the norm, out of the box, and so you need to not have it be so simple. And so I was like, okay, there we go. So then that's where Out of Line came from.
Names are hard because you're kind of stuck with it. It's funny because I always think about like Blink-182 or Limp Bizkit. Like, well, that actually shows you a lot about my childhood and the music I listened to. But
Linkin Park,
yeah. It's these names you kind of get stuck with, especially if you start to, or maybe you feel like you get stuck with them. I was thinking about naming my podcast Because the World Needs Another Podcast.
I like it.
Instead, I've kind of turned it into a little bit of a slogan, but I was like, I don't think I want to be stuck with that. I don't think it shows enough about the podcast. But then even the Ground Up Show is like, I really like the name, although I get sick and tired of things that I create, and I've like had 5 different business names for my freelance film work, and I just get sick and tired. Like, it started out with like Black Box Films. It's like super corporate and just not. It actually started out as my name, like Matt Diavella, videographer. I don't know if you did that from a photography perspective, where it's just like your name. But then it was like kind of rebranding it into a studio. But I just could never find a name I was happy with.
I love naming things, and I've never changed a name before. I do have a pattern with my other businesses that they're always like alliterated. So I have a lot of other businesses, and I don't mean to at all. But then as either if I have a business partner, if I'm working on it with my husband, then we'll just sit and brainstorm, and whenever names come up, they're always alliterated. But I love them. I love it. It's just, I like the way it kind of just feels light, and they all will have meaning as well. So, I don't know.
It has a nice flow to it.
Yeah, but I've never changed a business name.
Yeah. I have. That's a problem.
Well, I get bored in other ways where I'm like, all right, now I got to change this. But I also
Yeah.
feel like the names kind of evolve with whatever it is. I think its names are really interesting because like I have friends who use their real names in their projects, and then as they evolve, then their projects kind of aren't allowed to, if that makes sense. Like, let's say a musician uses their name and then the person keeps changing and evolving and they want to change and evolve their music, but their fans are like, no, you sound like this. But because your identity is tied to the name, it's a lot more difficult than someone who's just like, okay, well, now I'm going to start off this side project, or now I'm going to start a side band because I want to do something different. It's like, you can think of anyone, Trent Reznor. He has like a bajillion different side projects and things that he does, but different names. But if it was all just his name, you get a bit like boxed in where your fans are like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Get back in your box.
Right. I honestly think that like starting over is sometimes more difficult than starting to begin with, because when you're just starting to begin with, nobody's listening to you and nobody gives a shit what you're doing. So like the hard part is actually just building that traction and getting a following. But then when you try to do something different, then you have a lot of outrage from people who aren't ready for it or who don't agree with the direction that you're heading. So it can be challenging in and of itself. With your podcast, what have you learned? So it's been a couple months now. You started over the summer of 2017. What have you learned about podcasting and the medium? Because we started similar times. I think I started a couple months earlier in 2017, but relatively in the grand scheme of things, we started at the same exact time.
Yeah. It's I started in October, so we're just about 3-month mark, and I guess what I've learned is that it's kind of it's sort of a newer community, like creative community, so it's finding its own kind of energy about protocol and the way that people interact with each other and the way that people help each other out. Like I love how there's a lot of discussion going on, and I think in general audiences have gotten a little bit tired, I think, of like the loud channels like Instagram and Facebook and Twitter when you go on and it's just like huge. It's like you're opening a door and walking into an abyss. Like it just goes on forever. There's no end to it. There's no kind of small community feeling anymore. And I think that podcasting and podcasts and their listening communities are kind of providing those smaller rooms for people to get to know each other, whether there's like a Facebook group where people can discuss different episodes and what they thought. People can have follow-up dialogue, even podcasts that have gatherings where people get together and get to meet each other face to face. Like, and it's so funny because they're always like the same kind of people. Like whether the podcasters know or not, like their audience is usually pretty, like they have a community that they can really connect really quickly and easily, and because they have a lot in common, which is usually so rad to be like, oh, hey, look at these people. They all love this one podcast. So right. It is a new frontier, and it's getting kind of, I don't want to say saturated, but it's growing really fast to the point where I wonder if it'll be like blogging where suddenly everyone has a blog, everyone has a podcast.
It is like the new blog.
Yeah.
Blog. You can't start a blog now. Why would you ever start a blog? I feel
so bad when people are like, I'm a blogger, or I'm blogging, or I'm like, oh.
The saddest thing in the world is seeing the blog update. Hey guys, I know I haven't posted in a while. Because like I used to do that all the time. Like I've tried to start like 10 blogs in my life, and then they all just failed because, well, I'm not a writer. And like that's what I noticed. And when I started to make original content earlier last year, I was like, all right, well, like for whatever reason, I was like, all right, I'll start writing blog posts.
Yeah.
And like I wrote about my experience making a documentary and all this stuff. And I started to invest a lot of time into writing. And I'm like, I'm not a writer. I'm a filmmaker. I should focus on making videos. And then podcasting, I was like, ooh, I could make videos for my podcast and do this. But the blogs are tough now. I mean, is it even like, I mean, I have a couple friends who have very popular blogs, but they got started in 2010 and earlier. I feel like at this point in time, it's just very difficult is it impossible to break through the noise at this point?
I think it's kind of, I think even looking at something like SEO, like you get a brand new blog, and even if your content is amazing and you're posting all day every day, it's pretty tough to compete with some of those other blogs that have been around for a really long time. But I think that, like anything, if it's truly original and unique, and if what it is providing is something that isn't already out there, then I do believe that there's a way to be, air quotes, discovered, so that you can grow an audience from zero right now. I think you just have to be a lot better at what you're doing. Because I think 10 years ago, you could be like kind of a hack job, but if you were putting it out there, everyone would be like, wow, amazing.
Yeah.
And now you have to be real good. Real good.
You have to be real good. You also have to really love it, because in the beginning, if you don't truly love it, if you don't truly love writing or whatever the craft is, there's no way that you're going to be able to get through the tough times.
No, you have to be. My rule is, am I willing to put 3 years into this? Because in my experience, it takes 3 years to really get something from absolute zygote phase all the way up to, oh, this is now people know what this is. They know what to expect from this. I have like loyal people who believe in this. I've gone through my own trials of learning what I'm doing wrong. Now it's at a point where it's starting to make some money maybe, but no way can you start something from zero and actually be able to survive and pay the bills and not burn out. Not a chance.
Because I think that, right, there's a progression there on a couple of different levels where obviously we're talking about creating something online that people are interested in consuming, whether it's, a podcast or a video or a blog. But you have the progression of, first of all, building an audience. And sometimes like the audience doesn't need to be that big. Say if you're a dietitian and how many clients do you need every month to actually run a sustainable business? You might only need 300 people going to your website every month, but then if you can get 5 clients from that can help you pay the bills, like that's all you need. But it's the progression of getting an audience first, and then also figuring out how to monetize that and how to make it sustainable, because there's a lot of great artists out there. There's a lot of really creative people that can't turn their passion into a business and actually make money from it. And that's a challenge in and of itself.
I think sometimes the people who we see as, great artists or great creators, a lot of times they're actually not the best that's out there. It's just that they're the best at putting their work out there and having it be seen in a way that people can and have access to it. I think some of the best creators and artists in the world are people that haven't even been discovered because they're not promoters. They're not people who know how to market themselves, or maybe they don't even have the confidence to put their work out because of their own whatever's like maybe they just care more about their art than promoting it, or maybe they have social anxiety and don't want to put their work out there, but it's better than the stuff that we actually are seeing. What was the name of that photographer that got discovered a couple years ago? I want to say Golda Meir, but it wasn't. It was Vivian Frickballs.
Yeah.
Vivian
Frickballs, yeah, she's amazing. I actually don't know. I don't think I'm going to know who this person
really?
is. But yeah.
It was that like really older nanny that had gotten, she was like a photographer that had been taking photos for years and years and years. No one ever saw her work, and she died, and they found like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of, they did like a documentary about her, and she also has like now a freaking exhibition at art museums because her work was so stunning. But yeah, she's what I'm talking about, where she we'll call Vivian Golda Meir. Not at all.
Not her name.
Not her name. She was such an incredible photographer and artist, but didn't promote it, and no one even knew that she was creating this stuff.
Wow.
That's what I'm talking about. Those
it's
people.
Sad, right? It's like, come on.
Yeah, but then, is it? Because is notoriety what is that why we create as artists?
Yeah. It actually really depends on if she was happy or not. Like if she lived a happy, fulfilled life, then I'd be entirely happy for her because like, yeah, even like if you think about from our own perspective, like, is it the fact that people said, hey, I really liked what you did there, or like people admired you? that's not why I make stuff. That's not what gets you out the door, or why you grab a camera or get started with something. It's because you just really want to tell this story. So yeah, I completely agree with you there.
Yeah,
it is
I think
nice
it's like she could have probably made a ton of money and could have been famous, but maybe like that's not what she wanted. Maybe she did, like to be more of an introvert and she didn't like people, and maybe she had enough money or whatever it is. It's interesting how people kind of attach notoriety and acknowledgement as like, oh, then you've made it. And I think even about how kids, like when you ask kids what they want to be when they grow up, so many of them say like YouTubers or like famous, or like a rock star. And it's so interesting, like even as kids, that in their perspectives of the world, what matters is like being acknowledged and seen as being great. And I don't know, I'm into that question.
Yeah, I actually totally forgot about that, but that I have heard that before. That when kids ask what they want to be when they grow up, a lot of them say famous. They just want to be famous, and I think probably part of it is the issue of struggling with popularity as a young kid, because most kids aren't popular just by sheer numbers, by ratio. So they're like, oh, the popular kid, it seems like they got everything. Like that's what I want. But it does take a little bit of experience to realize, that's not going to make you happy in the long run. Because look at how many people who, like Jim Carrey said it, where, I wish everybody could get all the money and fame that they'd ever want so they could realize that it's not the answer. And it's only people like that, people that have actually achieved all that and gotten everything they ever wanted, that can really say that. And obviously it's easy. It's hard to hear that advice when you're at the bottom, or you don't have any money, or you're not making ends meet, but it doesn't make it any less true.
Yeah, and I think I just try to remember that on a personal scale. Like when I achieve something that I think is going to be the best thing I've ever done in my life, that I need to remember what it feels like to actually achieve it, because it's like, oh, I'm still me.
Yeah.
Everything's the same. I feel the same. My emotions are the same. My relationships are the same. Nothing changed. So, and I was thinking about that the other day, because one of my friends got a really big feature in a magazine, and she said, this is what I've wanted since I was like 15 years old. And now that I have it, nothing feels different. And I thought about that so much, because that's exactly like the Jim Carrey thing of like, I wish that everybody could know what it feels like to get what you want, and then be like, oh, that wasn't the point of life. So I try to remember that on a small scale. Not that I'm rich and famous, but just in my own things that I do. I don't want to keep chasing the next thing and keep fighting for more if I'm not in gratitude with what I have right now. Yeah. Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah. I think it takes a lot of introspection, where when I first found out about simple living, I was like, it blew my mind. I was like, this is amazing. You mean like to tell me that, because I heard about Tom Shadyac, who he was like this massive Hollywood director, and he moved into this 20,000 square foot mansion, this beautiful home, and he realized like, this is not making me happy. So he got rid of all of his stuff, donated a lot of his money, and moved into a trailer, like a beautiful trailer park, but a trailer nonetheless in Malibu. And I was like, that just blew my mind. I was like, you can do that? Like, that's an option. You can just give up the stuff. And like, obviously seeing that I don't need to get all that stuff to be happy. Like, obviously he realized that, and I can also follow that same path. But it didn't totally kind of settle into my psyche. It wasn't something that I fully accepted in the moment. It took like a year of really looking into it and really thinking about it more, and trying to get out of debt and doing all the things that I had wanted to do in order to like be quote unquote successful. But like same thing, like I graduated with $100,000 in student loan debt, and like, yes, it's stressful. Yeah. I can't tell you like what it feels like to have that kind of weight on your shoulders. But most days now I feel the same as I did when I was then in terms of my happiness. Like you said, if you're grateful for what you have at any given point in time, I feel like you're going to feel the same way, and you're not going to feel that way as long as you're making the ends meet. Because obviously it can be very stressful if you're not.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's kind of step one.
Yeah.
Make sure your ends are meeting.
Yeah. You said something before about like people that are really good, or they don't have to be the best in order to be noticed, in order for people to actually like your content or for you to actually be able to make a living doing that. And I feel like in a lot of ways, that's like what inspires me, because when you see people that just, you're like, I could do that. Like and that's like kind of how I got into podcasting, where there was podcasts I listened to that I loved, but I'm like, I would do it a little bit differently. Like, that's a good podcast, but I could do it better. I think I can do it better. And that's even with documentaries. It's like, I think I could do that better. When you start doing it, you're like, okay, it actually is very challenging. This is very difficult. There's a lot that I didn't realize that goes into these things, because sometimes from the outside, everything seems obvious. But yeah, I'm curious to how are you inspired? Because I guess you could be inspired by two ways: either inspired because people are so bad, or be inspired because people are so good. And how do you find inspiration in that way?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, an interesting way of thinking about it. Because I think I'm not necessarily inspired by either per se. I'm more inspired when I remember that other people aren't other people have their own flaws in the way that they create. So maybe the first one, maybe more like I'm inspired because I'm like, oh, well, even if we perceive their work as perfect, if I know any creative people, or if I even look at someone's creativity over a certain period of time, there are going to be things about it that could improve. And knowing that and kind of giving, and knowing that and kind of giving myself permission to not be perfect. I'm not a perfectionist at all. Like, I'm literally very like, okay, cool, we're good. next thing. Like, I'm always moving ahead. And I think that for me, that I'm grateful I'm not a perfectionist, because I'm around a lot of them a lot of the time. And sometimes I'm like, oh, you guys could be so much more productive if you just let go a little earlier, because the percentage that something improves when you sit and chew on it for that extra 12 hours is like less than 1%. And it's not that like half a percentage isn't even noticeable by the people who are consuming what you're creating, because they're not just sitting with it, staring at it like you are and obsessing if you're hypothetically a perfectionist. Whereas if you just let it go and kind of put it out and just let people respond to it, I think we can also grow from feedback. So even if something isn't great, even if something isn't perfect, because it never will be, that's the secret. The secret is you can sit and fix it until every single piece is in place, and think for like an eighth of a second that it's perfect. Then you put it out there and you're gonna be like, oh, I wish I had changed this, or oh, I knew that wasn't right. And it's never perfect. So believing that you can get there is what slows people down. And so I'm just more like, put it out there, move on to the next thing, put it out there. You'll learn. You'll be like, oh, I would have done that differently. Cool. Now you're already making something new that you can apply that lesson to. If you just sit on the same note for your whole life, you kind of you're limiting yourself and everyone else who gets to consume what you make. Does that make any sense?
I 100% agree. I wonder if it's different for people who are just starting out. Because say you're just starting out, and I'm talking about people who are learning a craft. So if you pick up a camera for the first time and start shooting photos, you don't know that much about the craft. So you're just trying to learn like how to set exposure, how to color correct, how to edit, how to crop, all these different things that you have to learn. And there's like thousands and thousands of tiny details, and when you're trying to learn an application and going through each of the tabs and trying to figure out where everything is, I think it takes a lot of time. And so I wonder if it's actually okay. It's probably not. I don't know. Like you tell me, but it might be okay to spend a little bit extra time when you're just getting started out, like tweaking photos and actually just understanding that that's a process of learning. But at the same time, you got to get past that photo to get to the next. And you're probably going to learn more by working on your 100th photo than working on that one photo 100 times.
Right. And I think, yeah, I mean, when you're learning something new, there is going to be a process to it. So I'm not being an advocate for being sloppy. Y'all, do not be sloppy.
Right. You have to put out good shit.
Yeah.
Like, don't put out crap.
Nope.
You got to use your gut. And you're like, but also there is good enough. You get, like a lot of people talk about the 80-20 principle. So you get 80% done and you're like, that's close enough. That's going to be good. Because also, man, I don't know about you, but I look back at my work from 2 years ago. It's always 2 years. I don't know why. And I'm like, that's garbage. Like, that is the worst. I can't believe clients pay me for some of the videos that I've made. I'm like, did they actually get value from that? Mm-hmm. Did that actually help their business in any way? Mm-hmm. It's tough sometimes to look back at it.
Yeah. But, 98.7% is still an A. So
wow,
that's my life mantra.
Yeah. And just keep moving forward. I mean, you're so right in that you just have to just focus on the next project, because even if you hated that last one, I think that's what we were trying to do, is that we realize that like we can get better. You're like, oh, I learned so much from that last project. I can bring that into the next one.
Yeah. And you're not frustrated because you've been sitting with something that feels stale and old. It's kind of like if a woman, let's just take it to,
for instance,
take it to babies for a minute. Let's say a woman's pregnant and she hits 40 weeks and she's like, I'm not done. Give me another minute. And she wants to keep the baby longer and longer and longer. Like, that starts hurting her body because the baby's like too big. And it's like, come on, let the baby fly. Not fly, but mm-hmm. free.
Yeah.
And the baby can't start to get to know its life and actually kind of be its own being outside of that space. So it's kind of that same idea of like, let your creativity actually be born into the world. Let other people interact with it. Let them be like, oh, it's cute, or like, ooh, it's kind of weird looking, and let other people start interacting so that whatever you're creating can take on its own persona, so that people can be like, let's say with your podcast, instead of you sitting with it for like 3 years and being like, I'm going to make sure I'm the best podcaster that's ever been born. Instead of being like that, and if you just sat in your room by yourself for 3 years and just like, researched every single like mic you could get, every single light you could get for your videos. If you just sat on it for 3 years and then you released it, everyone would be like, did you just put like a 3-year-old into the world? Like, what just happened? What is this? Like, where did this come from? But when you put it out as an imperfect little being, suddenly everyone can grow with it and get to know it as it grows, so that there's more of that like developmental, it's sort of just, there's more of a loyal fan base because they're like, I remember when he was a baby, instead of it being, I'm making some very strange.
That was a weird metaphor. It was a weird metaphor. I'm not gonna lie, but like the idea is amazing. I mean, the idea it connects with me 100%, because when I was starting the podcast, I kind of had this idea. I was like, oh, I should just record 10 episodes. I should. And like, this is advice that I've heard from other people where it's like, oh, you're going to start something. You really want to be consistent with it and you don't want to be overwhelmed. So people say like, just whatever you're making, if you want to release it consistently, make 10 of them and then you can release them every week, and then gives you time to make other stuff. I did not do that. Like, I just recorded a story. It was a story about the first time I shot a reality show with E. I was just a cam op, and then I forgot to hit record. It was a bad day. It was a bad day for me. Yeah. I did the only thing I was supposed to do, which is hit record. And then it was this crazy pivotal scene where this woman was going kind of crazy, yelling about like this talent show that her daughter was in, and she was just losing her mind. And then I forgot to hit record. The producer in my ear was like, that's perfect. Cut, wrap, we're done. And then I was like, oh my God, I didn't even record. And then I was just too timid, whatever it was, too ashamed, that I decided not to tell them. And so I never worked with them again. But it was just to let other people know and other creatives know that like this shit happens. Like, bad stuff happens when you're making and putting yourself out there in a way that you can fail. And there will be a lot of failures along the way. And a lot of times there's no platform to talk about those things. Sometimes people write about them in Facebook posts, but like a lot of times you generally just put your best stuff out there into the world. So it's nice to be able to share that. So I posted it, put it out there, and then I was like, all right, well, what am I going to do for next week? And then it was a scramble, and I wasn't that consistent for the first 6 months, maybe the first 4 months. But then things started to connect, and I started to pick up the pieces, and now I'm like, I have a lot recorded because I really love doing it. So like some weeks I'll record 5 episodes, and then, I'll have, like right now I probably have like 8 to 10 episodes like already like lined up and ready to go, which is just, It is nice now, but I would say to get started, you don't need to do that. You should just get going. And then, like you said, you learn along the way. Like if I didn't release that first episode and then start making it and putting it out there, I never would have, like the podcast wouldn't be what it is today.
Right.
And you wouldn't learn from getting those pointers from your audience.
So the moral is don't sit in a room with a 3-year-old baby.
I was going to say, give birth. Give birth. That's going to be the name of this podcast. Give birth. I'm going to write that down. No, I don't know.
Just
That's
give
weird.
birth to your creativity.
Yeah.
No, the name is 98.7% is an A.
Wow. 98. I don't know. That's weird. Is that, I don't think that's like, it's like really good, but it's not catchy.
It's
Maybe you can't put like a number 98.7 in the title of a video. Although, what do I know? I don't know.
Well,
Maybe that could be the recipe.
okay. All right. The recipe is 98.7%.
98.7%.
Yeah.
Did you hear the refrigerator just turned off? And now it's nice and quiet, which is great. I found out today that you have an Australian husband.
I do.
Which is amazing because I have an Australian girlfriend.
No way.
Yeah, we should start a club or something.
We should. Where's she from?
She's from Sydney.
Nice.
Yeah, where's your husband from?
Melbourne.
Melbourne.
Have you
Do
been
you say
there?
Melbourne?
I do.
You don't. That's not what you have to say Melbourne.
No, I don't. Because if I did, I probably wouldn't still be married.
Oh, really?
No, I lived there for 2 and a bit years.
Oh, you
and
did?
I still go back every year and I love it.
Love it.
Love it.
How's your Australian accent?
It's good when I'm around it. I can easily do it, but you know, Australian girls talk very differently to American girls, and it's very, yeah. It's when I have it in my ear, I can do it really, really well. But it's very difficult to do a good Australian accent.
It's tough.
Yeah. What about you?
Everybody does the British accent when they
Yeah.
meet her, like,
Yeah.
hello there, chap.
Yeah.
And they're like, and she's like, I'm not British.
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
British. That's like the most common thing. My Australian accent's terrible. But you lived there for 2.5 years, so I feel like you pick it up better that way when you're around it all the time. Natalie, she started to lose her accent. I mean, it just becomes softer.
How
Like,
long has she lived in
About
the States?
3.5 years.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah.
That's short.
Yeah.
Jaden's been here for 10, and he's very committed to his accent. He
He,
will
like,
not.
does practice.
Oh, my word. He would be so mad. Like, one time he said data the other day, and
Yeah.
I went, babe. And he was like, and he was really upset because it's data. And
Data.
he actually was like, okay, I got to make sure I don't let myself leave. Because
Yeah.
he's very, very patriotic, which is unusual for Australians to be so patriotic. But I think because he's not there, he misses it and loves it. And
I think that's what happens when they come to America, especially being around all like the American pride and being around that culture. They're like, they have to try to get on top of it and,
Right.
and not lose it.
Right.
I pick up I don't pick up any of the accent, but I do pick up some of the words. They have a lot of words.
they do.
Like,
Good ones.
yeah.
What do you pick up?
I like sus. Like, oh, let's suss it out. Which is like look into it.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. Do you know any others?
Oh man, I forget which ones are even Australian anymore
Yeah.
because they've just been a part of my vocabulary for so many
Yeah.
years because we've been together for like 13 years.
Oh, okay.
So they're just it's like in my brain.
So integrated.
Yeah, I can't remember which is which, but yeah, I mean, so many. Like I'll say like, oh, they're having a pash for like a kiss, or
Oh, I've
like,
never heard that.
yeah,
Pash.
like a pashing. They're pashing, like having a
Pashing
passionate,
out.
yeah, pashing a passionate kiss. They're pashing, or like, I mean, I say doozy a lot, which isn't really that, like most Americans know what that is, but I just say like, oh, that's a doozy.
She says sookie lala. I don't know if is that a thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, stop being a sook.
Yeah, that's like a whiner.
Yeah.
Like being
She says that a lot to me, apparently. Stop being such a sook.
that's awesome.
You work with your husband. Mm-hmm. And that's a thing that I couldn't ever do. That's
It's a thing. It's a thing for sure. It's its own. It's like a separate relationship that you have to work on. So it's almost like if you're working with someone and you were married to someone, and then you have both of those dynamics and all of the relational elements of both of those relationships that you have to consider, but then they're in the same person. So you don't ever get a break. So you can't ever be like, hang on, like, let's just put work on hold and then put on our relationship. But then it's like your brain remembers that you just spent the whole day with that person and that they were frustrating. And so then instead of being like, oh, it's so good to see you, how was your day? It's like, okay, it's
Yeah.
you again.
Yeah.
And I have to tell my brain that now we're just going to have fun and not think about the stressful work day. And we're going to sit and watch Netflix and have so much fun togetger.
Yeah. It probably takes a little bit extra work
does.
to make it work. You guys both work from home?
We have a studio space in Atwater, so that's where we're working out of right now, which is really nice because we used to work out of we have a spare bedroom, and that was sort of our workspace for a while. And it is nice to have things more separate, I will say. And a lot of times we're working on location for different shoots, and we travel a lot. So we try to keep work at our actual home to a minimal, because it minimum, not a minimal.
Minimum.
Sorry, guys. Minimum.
You blew it.
I blew
Podcast
it.
over.
I don't know my words,
Yeah.
but we try to not just be, it for sure the boundary is like no working in bed, because that's just weird to me. It's like, it's just, I don't know, there's too much enmeshment there. If it's like, no, this is there has to be something sacred. Otherwise it's like you're working everywhere together, you're trying to be married and enjoy this totally different separate thing all in one space, and your brain just can't, be like, oh, here's segment 1, here's segment 2, and it's all happening in the same space.
Yeah, I tried to do the no phones in bed rule. I failed. I mean, I personally can do it just fine, and I generally don't do phones in bed for myself, but she does do phone in bed, which is I just got to give it to her, because a lot of times, I mean, she'll be working all day, she'll come home, we'll hang out, we'll have dinner, and we'll spend time together, or maybe watch a show, and then she doesn't get a lot of time to kind of catch up with her friends in Australia or in London. So, and also she has it's her own life too. It's like a balance where you're like, I would prefer not to do phones in bed, but if that's what she wants to do, you kind of have to give in sometimes. But I actually do like working from home.
Yeah.
I've had a studio space. I worked out of a WeWork before. Both were decent experiences. The studio was tough because I worked by myself, and I didn't need a space to shoot, so it just seemed useless, and there was no kitchen, and there was just a lot of stuff that was wrong about it, or that was challenging. Because the thing I love about working from home is my diet is so much better, because I can just head to the kitchen and all my food is here.
Yeah.
Less planning, less prep. I don't have to pack a lunch. But obviously then the downside is that you are working. You're sometimes I don't leave the house. You ever do that where you're I haven't seen the sun today. I've been just working all day.
For sure.
Yeah, but that's, I guess, the only downside. You like working from a studio?
Yeah, I think it's we've had the studio for over 2 years now, and for a while we were renting it out a lot, so we didn't have access to it. And there was a plus side to that. Obviously, you're making an additional income by renting out your space, but then we started to say, well, isn't there some value in us using it for why we actually created it, which is for us to have a separate space to work in that's different from where we're just eating and hanging out as a family. And so we sort of took it back not from anyone other than just the rental space of being nah, it's ours. I want to put my desk there. I want to actually get to use it. And so I really like it because I think I'm more intentional about focus. So it's instead of starting my day with a coffee, and then I check my phone, and then I'm on Instagram for a minute, and then I check Twitter, and then I get sad about what the president tweeted, and then that whole thing, and then I open my email, and then I start to do that, and then a couple hours later I check my email again, and it's kind of this sort of everything's bleeding into everything. And instead it's more okay, I'm at the studio, I'm emailing for an hour, I'm going to edit for an hour, and then I can go. I don't need to just kind of have things just be one messy day of kind of work, kind of life. It's more no, I'm focused, I'm intentional, I'm doing this, now I'm done, now I can go. And I like that a lot.
It sounds like most days you try to have a structure to your days where you plan it out, like what you said, where, I've definitely fallen into the trap of just checking email all day mindlessly, where it's essentially a form of procrastination, where I'm somebody give me something to do because I don't want to work on the work I'm supposed to be doing.
Absolutely.
But do you generally block it like that, where you're plan it out?
I think most days look different. Some days I'm recording a podcast, some days I'm shooting, some days I'm editing, some days it's every day looks so different that I try to have thought through the day before it happens and at least block it out just for that day. But it's not like there's ever a schedule that I'm in that's like a routine. The only thing I've ever been able to create for myself that's a routine is working out 3 times a week, which has been so supportive for my own mental health and just feeling good and being happy, because I think I've discovered that just being in my body is something that's really, it's kind of like its own medicine. And I think when I'm shooting or when I'm on my phone or my computer and I'm just kind of sitting there, like we have these amazing bodies, and if we don't use them, then they kind of go to waste. And it's been cool to just like do more yoga or like go do some cycling classes and just be like, oh, this body can actually do really cool stuff, and it's here for me to actually use and to be in relationship with, where I can give it something, it can give me something. And so that's been rad. But that's the only thing that I'm like, even when I'm traveling, don't touch my workouts.
Yeah. I find that I need to have rules like that as well, where, especially with my workouts, and I do it for other parts of my life as well. But with the workouts, my rule is don't miss 2 days in a row. So I find that when I miss 2 days in a row, it's more than likely I'm going to skip the 3rd day as well. And then I'll just fall, because everybody goes through that experience where whether it's January 1st and you're trying to get into a new workout routine, or just you're generally inspired in the moment, you start working out, and then next thing you know, it's like 3 months later and you're like, wow, like why didn't that stick? Why didn't that workout routine keep going? And I found for me, it's make sure I just go, like I don't miss 2 days in a row, and then generally the workout routine keeps. I had recently haven't been able to go to the gym for the past 3 weeks because I got salmonella poisoning over the holiday. Yeah, it was.
Where?
It was actually back east. Literally, it was Christmas Eve when the symptoms kicked in. I was up the entire night, like back and forth to the bathroom every hour, like near vomiting the entire time. It was really bad. Like I was just for 2 to 3. Have you ever had food poisoning before?
Yeah, and actually this is really, really weird, but it was on Christmas Eve.
No way. It wasn't this past. No. Okay.
No, it was like 2005 or 6, Christmas Eve, and I got salmonella, and I feel you.
Oh my God.
It was the worst.
How long did it last?
Well, it lasted like 2 days, and then it was in Australia, and I had a friend that does like a pressure point sort of. It's kind of like a form of kinesiology, but she came over and she cleared my body of like the allergy. So she basically used pressure points to be like, hey, that thing that's upsetting you, don't let it upset you anymore. And that literally changed my life. Like then it was just like over.
No
done.
way.
It did.
No way.
I'm not even lying to you. It was like 2 days in, and all of a sudden she like came, did the thing, and then boom, no, not another symptom, gone.
Wow.
I was like,
that's incredible.
I was amazed.
Because that is like, it's very obvious to know when the poisoning has left and the bacteria have left your body. You're like, your body feels differently. I'm a complete idiot, but this was my first time getting food poisoning and starting to feel bad. Like it actually lasted a good week. Yeah, it was a really long time of just really bad symptoms. I started to get a little bit better, I want to say, right when I got back to LA. You're going to laugh at me. And the doctor laughed at me as well. I heard I told like the one nurse, and then he went out and was talking to the doctor. And I heard like the door was right there, and I just heard him laughing at me. I was like, "You guys, this is unprofessional. I feel like you guys should be in a silent room. Everybody's hearing this story." But
they're tweeting it.
Yeah, exactly. When I got back, the first thing I did, and I was still suffering a little bit, but I felt a little bit better. So I was like, all right, I got a little bit cocky, and I got a burrito from Chipotle.
Oh, no.
That's what he said. He's like, why would you do that? They just had like the whole E. coli thing.
Oh,
and,
no.
So it was a pretty big steak burrito with cheese and sour cream and medium salsa.
How does that sound right now?
Right now today's my second day of actually feeling decent and on antibiotics, so I feel pretty good. I absolutely wouldn't do it again. It's going to be a month or two, maybe a year until I can have Chipotle again.
Oh.
No, but it was right back to square one with my symptoms, and I was just feeling shitty, just in bed all day. But lesson learned. Lesson learned.
Oh,
Yeah.
that sucks.
Yeah.
Why did that come up? What were we talking about?
I think we were talking. Oh, just how like I haven't been able to work out because I've just been sick.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but I'm excited to get back into it because I've been doing the hiking a lot. I don't know if you do much hiking around here.
It's pretty good.
Oh, that's like one of the best parts of living in LA versus New York. Everybody I'm now one of those people.
The
like,
versus
New York sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it does. No, it's
why did you leave? Well, besides your girlfriend being close to Australia.
It was mostly the Australia thing. A little bit of the weather, but it was the fact that we were getting serious, and we're like, all right, well, we need to start talking about settling down and creating a home, and it's definitely not going to be in New York. Mm-hmm. And I said, how about New Jersey? And she said, I didn't move halfway across the world to live in New Jersey, so New Jersey wasn't. My mom's going to be upset if she hears this, but so we decided on LA. It just kind of came up spontaneously from the idea. Like it was 3 months, and then we moved here.
Wow, but you said your sister's here, right?
Yeah, my sister lives in Silver Lake. So yeah, I had family here. My cousin lives here as well. So it wasn't as
That's nice. You're not like
crazy.
You don't know zero people.
Yeah, a couple people. Are you from LA?
No, I grew up in Milwaukee.
Right. You said.
Which is so I'm the oldest of 6 kids.
What?
I know.
I am the third of 7.
What?
Yeah,
That's
getting
so
salmonella. Pretty much the same amount of siblings.
Okay, in another dimension,
Yeah.
we've been friends for years.
Yeah, we're like best friends now.
Yeah, we are. Duh.
Grown up with a big family.
Yeah, it's a thing.
It's certainly a thing.
How many of you guys are creatives?
My sister, she is a podcaster, breathwork teacher. She's like a graphic designer. My brother, he's like entrepreneurial at heart. He works for a startup company. My younger sister, Megan, is a painter. And then Madison, Morgan are in high school.
Wait, are you all M's?
Yeah.
What are the names?
I didn't. Yeah. So I went through some of them. I can go through all of them, but
from the beginning.
All right, from the beginning. So my dad, Mark and Mary. That's where it all started.
Cute.
Isn't it so corny?
No, it's
I'm
not.
always so embarrassed.
No, I'm the one with the alliterated businesses.
That's true.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Keep going.
the same thing. And then so Michelle is my older sister. Mark, my older brother, and then Matt, and then Megan, who we went through. Mike, he's actually going to be in the Air Force. He's going to be a pilot, which I think is the most badass thing ever. Like he found out that he was going to be a pilot in the Air Force the same exact day that I started a YouTube channel. So I was like, all right, Mike, cool. Way to one up me. That's pretty dope.
You're like, hey, mom and dad,
Yeah. I'm trying to ring that in at some point though and get into one of these fighter jets, but he's still young. He's still kind of going through the program. And then we have Morgan, she's, probably going to be a veterinarian or a nurse or along those lines because the younger ones are still in high school.
Nice.
And Madison, she's like, she doesn't know what she wants to do yet, but she's very funny. She's like got like very much like a dry wit, and she's like she's starting to build this little meme account on Instagram.
Yes.
It's funny. It's great to have younger siblings because then I'm so disconnected with what people are doing, but it turns out people have 3-4 Instagram accounts and they have meme accounts and hidden
Finstas.
accounts. What's a Finsta?
Finsta, it's like it's all the kids are doing it.
Oh, they're doing
days.
Finstas?
Yeah, it's a fake. It's like an alter ego fake Instagram account so that you can post stuff or like people's stuff, but it's not like your name or your face. It's like it's fake Insta.
And then there's some that they do where they just have just for friends, where it's like you post really intimate things that you would and like really unflattering photos of yourself. It's really interesting to see.
It's really interesting. I think I like having younger siblings too. Obviously, I have 5 of them, but I really like checking in with what's cool these days. I do that a lot. My sister introduced me to YouTube a couple years ago because I was like, wait, YouTube isn't just where you watch photos of like the Beatles or like videos of them and their old performances. Like there's an actual thing here. And she was like, yeah.
Yeah.
And then I remember getting a text from her because she freaked out. One of her favorite YouTubers rented our studio space for a day and posted videos on YouTube from our studio space. And she was like, she was at your space. And I was like, I didn't even know who she was. Yeah. Like she just rented my space. I didn't know. So That was really funny. I still don't know who she is, but apparently she's a big deal.
Yeah, I keep trying to, like, I'll send my younger sister's text. I'm like, hey, do you know this person? Like, they were on a Disney show. It's like, we don't watch that. I'm like, damn it. Like, I really want to be cool, and I think I need to get Bieber. I got to get somebody.
You do.
Yeah,
You
like,
do.
that's the only way I'm going to earn their respect.
Yeah. Doesn't he go to, like, Hillsong or something? You could probably just start going
What's
to
Hillsong?
It's a church, I think, that it's like that cool church that he goes to. I don't know. I read about it in like GQ or something.
He goes to this Russian bathhouse that I go to right around the corner here. Does that sound weird, or I don't know? I wasn't expecting that reaction.
I was not expecting you to say he goes to a Russian bathhouse I go to.
Yeah, you know what's funny? I call it a Russian bathhouse. It's a spa. It's a spa. I mean, mostly it's a spa that Russians go to.
How do you know? Did they?
My friend Josh ran into, like, he saw him there.
Is it a nude spa?
It's not a nude spa, unfortunately. Trying to see some Bieber dick.
Is it like? Well, the Korean spas are all very.
That's weird. I wouldn't do that. I don't think
have.
I feel. Yeah, I don't think I feel comfortable. Actually, I did it in Mexico once.
Oh, how'd it go?
I don't think it was a naked spa, but
whoops.
the guy spoke broken English, and then I misinterpreted what he was saying as, yes, it's naked. So then I get in the hot tub naked. There's like people walking around me. I'm like, oh God, I'm the only one that's naked in here. It's really embarrassing.
That is amazing. That's like we were getting that's funny. We were getting massages in Nepal a few years ago, and we would just finish like this massive 10-day trek in the Himalayas, and we were like, let's get massages. This is a great idea. And we were like, how do we make sure that they're not wanting them to be something else? And so we asked for a couples massage, and we're like, oh, then it'll be obvious. And so we're like in the room together, and we're both getting massaged. And the woman that was massaging my husband Jaden she was like penis, like towards the end, and we were like, oh no.
Oh my
and
God.
then she was like penis, and she just kept. And we were like looking at each other on opposite tables, and we're like, no, it's okay, it's okay. And then the woman that was rubbing me was like, no, fenis. And I was like, oh, I think she's done.
Oh no!
I think she's telling us she's done.
Penis. Or maybe that's the best cover or best alibi of all time.
No, but she was just like, no, fenis. And I was like, oh, she's done. She's done. We're good.
Wow. Oh my God. What if the answer was yes?
I mean,
like, rolls over, and then you know how many people?
And then she's like, what are you doing, sir?
No, finis. Wow, that's really good.
We were laughing so hard. We were
Beware
just like,
of that.
Oh. In Nepal, it sounds like penis, but it's finished.
I've heard sometimes though that's pretty common.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a thing.
Some countries more common than here. It happens here, but I think you have to know the code word going in, I think.
Oh yeah. You gotta know the code
I don't really
word.
know. I'm just saying this from movies I've seen.
I know.
I definitely don't have personal experience doing it. For the record, if anybody's wondering.
One of my friends was one of the messagers. So I've asked her some questions and learned a few things. Yeah, she was the giver of the massage.
Wow.
So I've asked her some questions and
I
learned
need
some
answers. No, I'm really curious about how one gets into that line of work.
I think it's like it's sort of you need money. Yeah. And if you're a good massage therapist, and then you realize that the money jump is quite large if there's a certain willingness to do certain things, and she was, and so it was like it wasn't anything weird. It was more just like, oh, this is great money. Yeah, that was her reason.
Was that is that sanctioned by the massage place, or is that like I
don't know. No, it's usually they are involved.
Mm-hmm. I would think so.
Yeah.
That'd be a pretty bold move.
There was a big thing, I think recently, was it like Massage Envy, I think is in the middle of a really big lawsuit because there were people that came forward, at the end of last year when there were a lot of people speaking out about sexual abuse and assault. Yeah. A lot of people said, oh, I got taken advantage of it when I was getting massage. So I think it's a weird line right now because there's a lot of like there's a lot of things like massage where it's like I'm inviting this person to touch my body and I want them to, but then it's like, how do you make sure that communication has been clear enough that if someone feels uncomfortable, they can say like, no, not that, but not too late and not, I don't know. I'm ready for someone to come out with really clear kind of language that everyone can align to, so that everyone can be like, oh, that's how we communicate that and do it well. Because I think even a guy was asking me just last week, like, as girls, like, how do we communicate and make sure that we're all on the same page when it comes to consent? And I think that's a really tough one, because it's like, I mean, sometimes you don't want to ruin a moment and be like, okay, hang on, wait a second.
Can you please sign here?
Yeah. Like, it's just like, but you also don't want to not ask and kind of be like, oh, wait, oh, whoops, I crossed the line. So
I think, isn't it pretty intuitive?
I mean, I would say so, and I think you would say so, but there are, I mean...
Like, alcohol blurs the line, I think, but I think that's probably the biggest thing. And I think anybody who's consuming alcohol, and like personally, I've never been one to be so far out of control that I would take advantage of somebody, right? Like I just, maybe some people can get like that. I know friends that black out, right?
Yeah.
And they don't remember a thing. That's never happened to me. But yeah, I could see where like you would just be very cautious if you're drinking, especially if the other person's more drunk.
Yeah, but I think some people would be like, I am being cautious because, you know, they're drinking and they're not being aware. So I think alcohol definitely, especially with so many of the stories that have been coming out lately, alcohol is so often involved that it's kind of like, oh, that's definitely a gray area. And if you have a problem drinking and not being in good relationship with what you're actually coming off, like how you're actually coming off, then maybe we should just stop drinking so much.
Sober, pretty clear.
You'd hope.
Yeah. They say no. Okay.
Cool.
No means no.
Right.
It's a very interesting line.
Yeah, it's an interesting time, and I'm really glad it's coming up, as much as it's causing, obviously, like PTSD for a lot of victims of abuse, and there's a lot coming up that from people that haven't felt safe to talk about things for years, and they're having a lot of really genuine stuff come up that they need to work through and also talk about. Yeah. But I do hope that there is a shift just in our culture of, this is how we talk about it, this is how we communicate what we're okay with, and having there be less kind of just like, I think, shame attached to it, so that people don't talk as freely as they should. You
can see why some people wouldn't want to talk about this stuff. And it's like, it's obvious. And like, that's why it's nice. I mean, dude, like the first person that does one of these things, the first person that makes an allegation against one of these people is the bravest, because they could just destroy their reputation. People could just not listen to them, ignore them. But it gives people more courage, others to come out. It's just crazy. Like 2017 was a crazy year in terms of like the names and the high profile people that were essentially brought down by these things. And it's great that it happened. Great. Like, fuck those people. Because nobody gives a shit about those people. Like, it doesn't matter how talented you are, how skilled you are. If you're a shitty person, people aren't going to care. People aren't going to support you.
Yeah. It'll be really interesting to see what happens. I wonder if people like Kevin Spacey will ever be able to act again, or if they should be able to act again. If they'll just be cast as all of the villain roles. Yeah,
like what's going to happen to him?
It's very interesting.
Damn, like I feel weird finishing House of Cards, right?
I know.
You're like, shit, man, you ruined it.
It is a bummer. Like, I love so many shows and movies that have him in it, and I mean, even like Baby Driver was like one of the really good ones of last year, and when I think about it now, I'm like, oh,
yeah,
ew,
gross.
No, everything is ruined.
Maybe we can I think we could probably separate.
Yeah,
you got to.
Suspension.
You can't support him now, but also you think about everybody else that was a part of that, and like I think that would really be for like the director of Baby Driver, every other actor that was in it, it's like, damn, like they put everything they had into this piece, and then they're affiliated with Kevin Spacey. So now, you can't enjoy it.
Did you hear about the movie that what had just been finished that had him in it, and the director decided to postpone the release date and reshoot all the scenes that had him in it with a different actor? Did you hear about that?
Wow, no.
Yeah. And the
Kudos to him.
I know. And the whole cast. I want to say it was J.J. Abrams, but I'm probably making that up. But it was someone. I want to say it was him. Anyway, the other people that were in it all cooperated and were like, absolutely, we'll do whatever we have to. Like, we'll reshoot, we'll come back in. We are totally in agreement with this decision.
Kudos to
yes,
the director, the studio. Like, that's not a simple thing to do.
No.
So that's pretty great.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's a little bit smart because as a marketing move, if you release a movie that has like a recent, then it's
that's true. It's probably not all like. Just
to be good.
Just to be a good person.
Yeah. It's also like, I don't want my art to fail.
Yeah, exactly.
A little selfish, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see where this goes. This is going to be an interesting year.
I know.
So I'm curious how you got into photography to begin with, and like, how did you build your business?
Well, let's see. I got my first camera when I was probably like 12. My family traveled a lot. We did a lot of road trips with all the kids in one minivan. It was really fun. Anyway, it was. And so I got a camera back then. I shot film. I liked it. It was fun. And like photography always really mattered to me. But to me, I was also really sensitive about it because it was like the thing that every girl said they wanted to do. Like every girl was like, I want to be a photographer when I grow up. And I was like, ew, that's so gross. And so I was very kind of protective of it as this thing that I just did for fun. It was just for fun. I didn't want to be a photographer. I just did it for fun. And then it actually wasn't until, so then I met my husband, and he was also a photographer. He shot a lot we were both first musicians. That was like our main source of income. And so he was touring as a guitarist when we met, and he would shoot when he was on tour, and he would do a lot of, his own film stuff. And then when we got married, we bought each other a digital camera, which was like a million years ago. And it really wasn't until that point that he was like, it's not all bad to like be good at photography, and it's not all bad to let people, pay you to be creative and to take photos of them if that's something that we or you want to do. And I was like, okay, it feels really cliche, but whatever. I always really want to be original. So, it's really hard for me. It's
impossible. But you could be an astronaut photographer, and then you'll be like the first.
Well, we do say we want to go to the moon. We're both very like, we will.
Yeah,
we will.
I mean, you've been to every continent, so
True.
It just makes sense.
It makes sense
to go to the moon next.
We want to photograph a wedding on the moon.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so basically when I moved to Australia, we got, I started a blog, which was like really early 2006, I think. So it was long enough ago that I was like...
That's like when blogs started.
I know, but it was a shitty blog.
It was terrible. But they all were bad, like you said.
Yeah. But I wasn't trying... I was also like, oh, everyone's starting a blog, so I don't want to start a blog. This was just like me keeping up with my friends and family in the States so they could see what we were up to, because this was like before Facebook and Instagram. So... Facebook was just becoming a thing, and like normal people started to get access to it at like end of 2006, 2007.
Yeah, that was, I think, when YouTube started, was 2006. Like,
oh my gosh,
long time ago.
So
that's like when the internet started.
I know.
Can you imagine before YouTube?
Yeah, I can,
and
there. It was insane. It's so crazy that there are people that are alive now that don't remember life before like iPhones and stuff. Because I mean, I was an adult before iPhones, so they're so new, and yet even now, if you pulled it away from me, my whole life would have to change.
Yeah, you're like, oh shit, I gotta start over.
Everything would be different.
Wow.
So anyway, so then I started a blog that was just like, hey, this is what we're up to. And then people started saying, oh my gosh, I love your photos. Can I pay you to take photos? And at first I was like, that's kind of weird. And I didn't say yes right away. But then Jaden was like, actually, do you know the competition that's out there? Look at Olin Mills. Do you know what Olin Mills is?
Mm-mm.
Oh my gosh. In the Midwest, it was this place. I think it's closed. But it was a place kind of like Sears portraits where like you went in and sat on like a really weird fabric backdrop and there was like terrible lighting and sometimes double exposure where like your face was in the corner.
Oh my
God. Like, it was real so bad. Good. It was bad.
That's like all they did back then.
I know.
Like I remember my family and I would go and get a portrait once a year and we'd have these family photos. People don't do it anymore.
No, they don't. But I think they're starting to do more of like what we do, which is more on location, like in your home, having a photographer come to your house and like shoot you where you live and where you're doing.
Yeah, like on a picnic basket.
Right, which is super normal.
Yeah, totally normal. Just casual.
Just casually sitting on a picnic basket. But Jaden saw all those photos in Wisconsin, and when we would visit people's houses, and he'd be like, literally, the competition is so different to what we do. Maybe this is a thing. And so then we started saying yes and started just shooting. And that was really when social media was taking off so quickly. And so we would upload like a shoot and we'd post a few photos on Facebook. And then like we would get like 5 shoots just from that because people would be like, oh my gosh, this is cool and different. So we've actually been shooting for probably, well, if I'm good at math, which I'm not, more than 10 years. But as a business, we've probably been going for 8.5. And it's evolved a lot. We started with real people, weddings, things like that, just saying yes to whatever people ask for. We did like business headshots and we did so many different weird things in the beginning. And then it evolved into more clear, okay, this is what we shoot. This is what we charge. This is what we like. And now the people that we work with are always just like really good fits for us because they've seen our work and connected with it and they trust us, and then we get to create for them. And there's a very long answer to your question. Yeah,
so your client base, it seems like it kind of filters itself for the most part. You probably say no to a bit. There's probably some, like, I don't know, I'm curious like how often you're saying no to clients that just aren't a fit, or you got a bad vibe, or you're like, sorry, we're not the people for you.
Yeah, how often is difficult. Probably once a week. Usually it just has to do with either the brand, if they want us to create content for them. Usually we will, but sometimes it's like they want me to post as on like my Instagram account, and sometimes it's like a brand that I would never spend money on, I would never work with. So it feels really inauthentic for me to be like, sure, I'll take your money to say that I like your stuff, which I totally don't. I still want to be excited about what I'm doing and who I'm working with. So I think when it comes to that, I probably say no once a week. And we probably, like, even when we work with couples, like real people, we always Skype with them before, and either one of us sign a contract because we want them to get a chance to like vibe with us or not, and vice versa. And that way we can be like, oh, cool, they were awesome, we're great, and now we can all start to be friends and hang out, and it'll be fun to shoot you. Or it's like, ooh, our personalities are so different, and it's not personal, but maybe this is a better fit for what you're looking for.
Yeah. I mean, like, your clients are what your business becomes. And if you're like, say, if you're doing weddings and you don't like doing weddings, or like there's, certain corporate business videos that you get dragged into because it pays well. Like you said in the beginning, say yes to all those things and you get better at your craft. But eventually you need to make sure that you're working with people that you actually like being around.
Yeah, but it's kind of like you learn that through, it's kind of going back to my weird story about the 3-year-old baby. It's like if you just wait until the very perfect client comes to your door and asks to work with you, it will never happen. You have to get out there. You have to be making mistakes, working with clients that you don't really like working with, and then being like, ooh, now I know what not to do. Or you have to be working with your ideal client because then you can at least show what you're capable of. You maybe for less money than what you're worth, but at least getting it out there. You have to start somewhere. You have to enter the world as that little baby that is going to learn how to walk and figure out what the heck they're doing and what their name is and how to say it and how people interact with them. And if they never do that, then you're never going to, like, your ideal client is never going to knock on your door and be like, hey, we want to work with you, if you're not putting yourself out there.
What advice would you give to people who are just starting out in that world where maybe I would say most people are probably trying to transition from a full-time job,
Mm-hmm.
to doing something more creative, something that's more in line with their passions? Like,
Mm-hmm.
how do you go about making that transition?
I think a couple things. One, spend as much time working on yourself as you're working on whatever it is that you're creating. So the more I sit and worry about like the stupid things that I do in my personal life and in my relationships, and when I work on that, it affects my art and makes it better and makes me a better communicator with potential clients. So spend as much time working on yourself as your craft. But also I think that 3-year idea of needing to work on something for 3 years so that you can get a sense of what it is, what it's going to be like, how you need to be to make it succeed. I think for me and for Jaden, when we were starting out, we had other jobs for, gosh, like the first at least 3 years. Because it's kind of too much pressure to put on something brand new. When there are going to be days where you're totally burned out, exhausted, bummed out, want to give up. There are going to be those days, weeks, sometimes even months. There are going to be slow seasons, and it's too much pressure to put on like a tiny baby. And so you need to like you need to give kind of like oxygen to the fire so that it can actually grow. Mm-hmm. So I would say, it's going to be like 3 years of all in, and it's going to feel irrational and crazy, and you're going to feel crazy and you're going to fail. And there are going to be so many days that you're going to want to quit. But the difference between you and the people who will never get what they want is that you're not going to quit. And that's the only difference. Literally. The people who are getting acknowledged, the people who are winning Oscars, the people who are winning Grammys, they have shitty days. They want to give up. They have seasons where they're not inspired. They have seasons where they have $0. The only difference is that they never give up. The only difference is that they keep doing it, whether they're being acknowledged or not, whether they're getting paid or not. I mean, even the other day I was super freaked out on Facebook. One of my Facebook friends posted that she got an acknowledgement as like one of the top, I won't say what industry she's in, but she got like one of the very top, like she got celebrated for being one of the best in the world. And not even a year ago, she was posting on Facebook, guys, like I can't even pay my rent. Anybody, if you need, I will drive you around if you need a driver for a day. Like I'll clean your house. I literally can't even pay my rent. And I was like, okay, this is exactly what I'm talking about. This is someone who less than a year ago couldn't even pay her rent. And now she's getting acknowledged as one of the best in the world for the thing that she didn't quit. And that's it. That's really it. There's no short way there. There's no surefire way of not failing. There's no, this is the thing that you do so that you never have shitty days. Nope. You just get out there and you keep doing it and you keep putting yourself out there, and you're gentle enough with yourself that if it isn't working, you take a little holiday or you go work on yourself and stop working on your art for a minute. It's a commitment thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and not being afraid to change things up, to experiment, but like you said, don't give up. And you don't know whether it's going to be 1 year or 10 years. I just had Brian Bowen Smith on the podcast, and he was like, he's been a photographer for 20 years, and it took him 10 years until he could actually make it professionally, like without doing odd jobs. Like you get jobs here and there, but it was never consistent. And then around the 10-year mark, he ended up getting signed to an agency after going every year for the 4 years before that, showing his work. And she'd be like, the agent, which became his agent, would be like, no, you're not ready yet. Every year, just going back. And it takes patience, it takes persistence. But you're right. If you're, and that's what I find so rewarding by just hearing those stories, is just for us on our own paths. Because we're always working on something. Hopefully you're always working on something new. You're pushing yourself and challenging yourself to create new things that you previously thought were not possible. So it's good to know that other people.
Yeah. I mean, my brother-in-law, who's an artist in Australia, applied for his PhD like 5 years in a row. And every single year I was like, wow, he's going back in there. Wow, he is. And now he's freaking like, a doctor, and it's amazing. He finished it. But so many people would have tried it once and been like, meh. So many people would have hit the second no and been like, okay, it's really not meant to happen. And No, he just kept going and kept showing up. I saw Adrian Brody tweeted a couple weeks ago and said, my dad always told me that it takes 15 years to become an overnight success, but for me it took 17. And I was like, I think that was what the tweet was, and I was just like, yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
You need that. Like, I think the biggest thing that you said was just working on yourself. And that's one thing that I noticed about me that I just, every once in a while you just forget it and you forget how you started out. But it was like, I would just devour like self-help books, Tony Robbins audio tapes, like while raking the leaves in my parents' front yard. It's like those things help to inspire me and push me forward and realize that I could do this, that it was possible. And sometimes that's all you need. What do you say we get to quick questions, little short segment here
Yeah.
at the end of the
let's do it.
podcast, and then we'll wrap up.
We good.
All right. So quick questions. It doesn't have to be quick answers, so feel free to elaborate. Speaking of books, what book has made the biggest impact on your life?
That's really hard. There are a few that come to mind that I really, really, really love. So I'll
You can
just
rattle them off.
yeah, I'll just quickly say, I love Just Kids by Patti Smith. That to me was amazing. I love When Breath Becomes Air. Have you read that one?
Mm-mm.
Oh my gosh. It was so good.
It's kind of a meditation type book?
No, it's a book about a surgeon from Berkeley who was just finishing his residency and found out that he was dying of cancer. And he wrote a book as he was dying. And it's so good.
Reminds me of The Last Lecture.
I
Have you heard of
haven't
that
read
one?
that one.
Very similar. Like this guy finds out he's dying, and like this college would allow its professors to give one last lecture before they retire. So he gives his last lecture. It's like I'm gonna ruin the ending for anybody listening, but it's been out for a long time, so I don't care. But like the whole thing is like he gives this lecture, but it ends up and towards the end of the book and the end of the lecture, I think he explains it in the lecture, but it actually ends up being for his kids who are very young, where he's like, I am not going to be there for you, so I want to be able to give you these life lessons that I've learned. But it's like at the end of it, I remember just like hiding in the bathroom, like crying, reading this book. I'm like just broken. But it's like sometimes you need that. Sometimes you need to get a reality check.
Yep. Yeah, When Breath Becomes Air did that for me. I was like sobbing uncontrollably for.
Oh my God.
It was not like it was just powerful. Yeah. It was so powerful. And another one that I really love is A Course in Miracles, which is really weird. But that's more of a like self work stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I don't know if you know Marianne Williamson, but she broke it down. It's a weird long book, and so she broke it down into like 365 lessons, and so I did them a couple of years ago, and I'm redoing them again this year, and they're really rad. Just sort of like kind of like one sentence to think about for the day, but it kind of reframes everything and challenges everything that you do just naturally, and kind of checking in with it, which I love a good challenge.
That's great. What skill have you leveraged in a way that you think others haven't?
I think that connection is really, really important. And I think that sometimes I love connecting people, making people meet each other, being like, oh, you guys should know each other, and being like generous with who I know and how they can help each other out or make each other's lives better or make better art together. I think sometimes it's easy to kind of like hoard people and be like, no, these are my colleagues, or like, these are my friends, like get your own. But I think the more generous that I can be, the more I find that I get other people introducing people to me, because I just, I do that. And so like I've gotten to meet super rad people. I've gotten to do super rad jobs just because of that like free flow of like, hey, meet my friend. Hey, collaborate with my friend. And I like having people around me that are like that as well. I think it can be really draining to be around people who don't see relationship as a huge success piece in being a creative. I interviewed Jacqueline Johnson, who's the CEO of Create and Cultivate, on my podcast. And one of the things that she said was, your reputation is your resume. I was like, yep, that's like the best thing ever. And I think people that don't think about that, like how I show up, how I am in relationship, that's actually way more important than a piece of paper.
Absolutely. Well put. What's the simplest advice that's the most important to follow?
Stay open.
That's it. That's the name of the podcast.
Not 98.7% of the day.
Damn, no, that's definitely not going to be it. That's fantastic. A couple more questions here and we'll wrap up. One, I always mention this on every podcast. Sometimes I cut it out just because I don't want to annoy my audience. But if you look over your shoulder, I've got the photo of The Rock. It's my favorite photo of The Rock. I'm trying to get The Rock on my podcast.
Okay.
I have a website. It's called GetTheRockOnMatt'sPodcast.com. I've been putting a lot of work into it. Like the number one thing that my audience like messages me about is like encouraging me to get The Rock on, because if you know anything about The Rock, he's got the best ground up story. Started with $7 to his name, became WWE superstar, reinvented himself, and it's just a super inspirational character. Wow. And also, what an insane goal and challenge, like the busiest person on the planet. He does like 8 movies a year. So I'm trying to figure out a way to do that. If you have any advice for me, or if you happen to run into The Rock at the gym or wherever,
I'm totally going to keep that in mind.
Yeah, feel free to send him to my website.
It's going to happen.
Yeah.
You know that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's actually going to happen.
It is.
Brian Bowen Smith is friends with The Rock. And he tagged him in an Instagram post with that photo. And I was like, oh, shit. Like, I think he knows now.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that he actually is aware of a guy named Matt trying to get him on his podcast.
Then just don't give up.
And that's a start. Yeah.
Yeah. And you just keep putting it out there. And pretty soon, every time people run into him at like the grocery store, they're going to be like, oh my gosh, hey, there's this podcast that I listen to, and every single episode they talk about getting you on, and here's Matt's email, and oh my gosh, and he's going to get so tired of getting everyone at every coffee shop and podcast telling him that he's just going to call you.
I've got a couple of ideas. Like I didn't do it. I'm planning on doing this, and like it just depends on the timing and everything. But I want to get a billboard like near his house, which I think would be fun. I got a couple other ideas, but it's gonna like you said, he just needs to hear it enough times that eventually something's gonna break, and then it'll give in. But I'm patient, so 5 years, 10 years, whatever it takes.
I'm saying less than 3.
I'm saying less than 3.
Yeah.
I think less than 3.
It's going to happen.
Not going to give up, though. All right. So 2 more questions here to wrap up. One thing to read, watch, or listen to before you go to bed. I mean, sorry. I screwed up that question.
Okay.
All right. Let me do that again.
Sure.
I'm going to edit that out.
Okay.
All right. 2 more questions. So one thing that people should read, watch, or listen to before they go to bed tonight.
Oh, man. My current favorite show in the world is called Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia. It's on Viceland? Viceland. Yeah.
Google it.
Yeah. And the last time I loved a show this much was in Australia. There was a guy named John Safran who made a documentary series about him traveling all over the world and trying every religion. And it was called John Safran versus God. And so like he would go to like Africa and do voodoo ceremonies, and he went to like, you know, New Mexico and did peyote, and he went to the Mormon tabernacle. Like he just did everything, and he basically like broke down what the religions kind of follow and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, this Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia is all about drugs, psychedelics. And this guy named Hamilton, we all need to be his friend. I want him on my podcast. There's my shout out.
That's your big goal. Yeah.
I want Hamilton on my podcast, but he is like a super dry, hilarious guy who just goes all over the world and basically looks at different psychedelics that different people around the world use and where they come from and what the history is. And I've never been so fascinated by the little profiles of different people around the world. I just think it's like such an intimate look at the way people do life, what they value, what they're trying to see when they do drugs, what they're trying to escape from. It's super, I'm like obsessed.
I got to check that out.
It's really good.
Sounds great.
It's really good.
And last question, how should people find you online?
Well, let's see. There's a few thousand ways. My main one is probably Instagram, which is at Team Woodnote. Team and then Woodnote, WOODNOTE. That's where I am the most, and I reply to DMs and stuff. So, that's a good way to do it. Also, email's fine. I'm also Team Woodnote on Twitter, and I love Twitter again. I think Twitter's amazing.
Twitter's cool.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
sort of lost its mojo for a couple years in there, but then I think with the election, everybody went back over, and I think also there's just more engaging dialogue that isn't happening on like Instagram and Facebook because of all of the chronological timeline bullshit. So I'm loving Twitter.
I meet a lot of cool people through Twitter, surprisingly.
Yeah.
Like, I've met a couple really good friends through it. You just never know.
You never know. I'm so
cool.
into it.
Yeah. You just have to, and this is something that I always have to remind myself, to be in control of these platforms and not let them control you. Because sometimes it can be very easy to compulsively check. So I'm like, I gotta schedule this. I'm gonna schedule my tweet time.
I turned off all my notifications, which
That's
is
great.
also good because I don't want my phone dinging all the time.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah. But find me. Say hey.
Great. All right. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You know what was crazy about this episode that I just realized? It's being released on February 7th, 2018. Do you know what happened on February 7th, 2017? It was the very first podcast episode of The Ground Up Show. That makes us 1 year old. Maybe I'll add some sound effects there, like some exciting like party sound effects. Maybe like an audience cheering or people clapping. Really exciting to get through 1 year. When I look back over the past year, not to get too self-congratulatory, there were some challenges to keep this podcast going. I started it out on a whim. I recorded a story. It was like an 8-minute, 10-minute podcast about the biggest mistake I'd ever made, the most embarrassing mistake I'd ever made as a filmmaker. And I didn't know where it was going to go. I didn't know the direction I was heading at that point. I just knew I love the medium. I love podcasting. I wanted to be able to help people and share my stories. I didn't realize that I would be interviewing people. A few episodes in, I realized I'm not that interesting by myself, and I can't hold an hour conversation in my own head. So, at least one that's engaging enough. So, what I did was I started to bring on guests, and something amazing happened. I got to meet and connect with incredibly talented people. I was humbled by each and every one of them. You learn something from sitting down and talking with other creators. You learn that we all struggle with a lot of the same things: self-doubt, overcoming obstacles, staying consistent, making art that we're really proud of. These are all things that every creator struggles with. And these people that we're interviewing, those who have achieved a lot, who've achieved measures of success through their own definition of success, they go through this as well. Doesn't matter if you're at the top, if you're the rock, or if you're at rock bottom. Everybody struggles with these things, and I'm hoping that these stories and these conversations give you guys some motivation and momentum moving forward. I know that for me, when I was getting started out, and even to this day, it's amazing to hear these stories, to be able to get encouragement from others, because a lot of times we don't have that in our direct life. Some of us are lucky to have great, significant others and family and friends to help push us forward. When I was starting out, I didn't. I had family and friends. I had a couple people there that really helped me out, but for the most part, I didn't have anybody who was doing what I was doing. I didn't have any roadmap for success, and I'm hoping these conversations are that for you. So, yeah. We are just getting started. I have no plans to stop anytime soon. I am nowhere near being able to make money and make this a sustainable thing. But I'll tell you what, I don't give a shit. I don't care. I'm going to keep doing this because I fucking love it. I really do. It is incredibly exciting, and I'm going to find a way to make this work. Thanks for listening. See you next week.